Everyone. We'll ask that you be patient as we let everyone into this conversation one by one. But welcome and thank you for registering and being part of this discussion. A lot of you were really interested. I'm sure this is a hot topic during this season. So just give me a few minutes as we let everyone join us before we can start. Okay. So without much else, I'll keep letting people as we go on. So I want to really thank the panelists who are here tonight and also welcome them to you. We have been lucky, or rather blessed, to have with us 3 people from the aviation sector. They tell me they come from different sectors, different segments, and I'm going to invite them to talk a little bit about what each of the sector does. And the first one to my right is Vincent Rague. I never know whether to say Ragu or Rague, but I think I'll stick with Ragu. And he is the chairman of the board, Jambojet, amongst other things. But today he's here in his capacity as chairman of Jambojet. Welcome, Vincent.
Thank you very much, Vicky.
You're welcome. And
hello, everyone.
Yeah, I'll read the rules to everyone joining in later. And they're all on mute for obvious reasons so that we can have a flow in conversation. The next one, next to Vincent on my screen is Mbuvi Ngunze. He is joining us as chairman of Safarilink Limited. I hope I said that correct. And thank you very much for joining us, Mbuvi, tonight.
Good evening. Thanks, Vicky. I also wear another hat, which is the chair of the Kenya Air Operators Association. So I'm double hatting today.
Good, fantastic. I saw it, but I didn't quite know how to overlay it. So thank you for clarifying that. So, and then the last but not least that I will introduce to you today is Allan. Allan, Martin, I've forgotten how to pronounce. Kilavuka. Allan Kilavuka, the CEO of Kenya Airways. He was telling me he's sure he's a wanted man tonight with a lot of questions from everyone about Kenya Airways and what Kenya Airways is about. But welcome, Allan, and thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. You should have said that you are introducing us in the order of the least preferred to. No. Least preferred to the most preferred.
No. I think the thing
or age. Let's say age.
No. I think
last
but
not least.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure being here, and good evening to everybody.
Okay, you're very welcome. And to start off, I will invite Vincent to talk about a little bit about Jambojet, and just to set the context before we have this conversation, I'll invite everyone. Actually, before I proceed, sorry, I didn't do this in the right order. I will ask everyone to at least keep themselves muted. If you have any questions, just type them on the chat box below, down there. I'll keep reading them and I'll ask the participants to answer them. And if we do have time for a Q&A, I'll then ask people to raise their hands and they can ask questions. But then, Vincent, over to you. Tell us about Jambojet.
Thank you, Vicky, and good evening, everyone. As you heard, I'm chairman of Jambojet. We are perhaps the youngest of the 3 airlines in the business in Kenya and East Africa. We operate a business model that is referred to as low-cost carrier. People tend to refer to it as the cheap airline, but it is not about cheap. It's about low cost. What this means is that we simplify the operating model in order to keep the operating costs low and thereby pass the benefit to the traveler by charging lower fares. We do that by operating a single type of aircraft, keeping management structures low so that our overheads are also kept low. Mm-hmm. We tend to focus on what is referred to as short haul, that is short distances, typically around less than 2 hours, or up to about 2 hours. And we go point to point. We also offer limited passenger services. So we don't have what is referred to as legacy services. Some people say, well, you don't even give us a cup of tea or a soda on board. But if we do that, then we have to pass that cost to you. So we give the passenger the option to buy a soda or not to buy a soda. And so what comes out of that is lower fares on average, or no frills. Our ambition is really to revolutionize the travel industry by getting people who are not used to flying to start flying. As an example, when we started, we got passengers from a matatu that were traveling to Kisumu. They didn't know where they were going, and we got them to fly. We got them to the airport, got them onto the aircraft, and they were in Kisumu in 45 minutes. A lot of them became flyers, because if you're a business person, instead of spending 5-6 hours between Nairobi and Kisumu, you spend 45 minutes, and that gives you time to do other things that perhaps generate more revenue than what you saved in fares. So this really is changing. If you look at Mombasa, the biggest threat for us was the SGR. The SGR, when it came, we lost a lot of passengers for a short period, because a lot of them felt that paying 900 shillings first class was better than paying 2,500 shillings to Mombasa. But interestingly, after a while, we got most of those passengers back, especially the business people. Because if it takes you 5 hours to get to Mombasa, and then it takes you another 2 hours from Miritini to Mombasa, instead of 45 minutes, and then you take, so all of that adds up and gives us an advantage as a preferred mode of travel for a lot of people who want to get to where they're going to in a simplified way and more efficiently. And so that is what we are. By the time the pandemic hit, we had started flying to Entebbe, to Kigali, and we were flying to Bujumbura and Kigali on behalf of Kenya Airways. So our ambition is really to start to introduce and embed the low-cost carrier model in the East Africa region. And that's who we are as Jambojet. The other thing we focus on is really delivering value for the flyer by being on time, because the turnaround times we try to do, because of the limited services, is to turn around the aircraft within a very short time, because the higher utilization we have of the aircraft, the more efficient we get and the lower the operating cost. So that is what a low-cost carrier is, and that is what Jambojet is to the flying public. Okay.
I'm sure people have learned a bit more about the philosophy behind the lack of the cup of tea. At least I know I have. Thank you very much. So I'm going to invite Mbuvi to just tell us a little bit more about Safarilink and what Safarilink is all about.
So Vicky, it was interesting listening to Vincent, because he takes me right back to that day around the matatu, and it's interesting to hear how Vincent, as my chairman, became a total advocate of Jambojet. So kudos, Vincent. We've come a long way. Safarilink, I chair Safarilink, and Safarilink is really 75 to 80% of Safarilink business we go into the parks. So it's really a safari-oriented airline, largely operating caravans, which are 12-seater aircrafts into the national parks. By the way, by way of statistic, you might not know that there's over 1,000 airstrips in Kenya.
Oh,
and
really?
only 14 of those are managed, or 14 or 21 of those are managed by KAA. So we reach out to places. A lot of people probably cannot imagine that you can reach. We reach by aircraft. We also have about another 20% of our business, which we call sun and sand, because a lot of people who would travel to the packs would then subsequently want to go to the coast. So we fly to Lamu, we fly to Diani, and then we also fly to Zanzibar. And over the last year and a half, we started also to do Kisumu. But we also do places, we do specialist services for the likes of Talo into Lodwar Kapese, we fly into Kitale. So it's, but the largest part of Safarilink business up until the pandemic was Safari oriented. I said I'm in two capacities here. So in my role wearing my chair of the Air Operators Association, the association is really around lobbying to get the best possible for all operators of the industry. And if you think about the industry, it is not only people who actually convey passengers. There are operators for cargo services. There are operators the people who do charter services. Out of Wilson, there's people who provide services to the likes of WFP, the UNHCR, and other people who enter into long-term contracts out of here, Kenya, into the region, be it Somalia, South Sudan, and other places, all out up to West Africa. We also have people who do ambulance services as charter services. There's private carriers here. So the whole range of operators who are members of the association, including training organizations in the aviation sector, AMOs, approved maintenance organizations, amongst others.
Okay, that sounds like, well, a lot of people. Actually, I'm pretty intrigued by the 1,000 airstrips. So who takes care of the other 900?
A lot of them are managed locally, either by lodges or the people who operate in those particular areas.
Okay. So I'll give the next chance to Allan. We all know Kenya Airways, but Allan, could you just tell us in your own words?
I was as Vincent and Mbuvi were introducing the airlines, I was wondering, what am I going to say that people don't know already? So I was really struggling with that. So anyway, I mean, maybe I should say some things which I think you may not know, and then of course we can have an engagement, which is that, last year we transported 5.1 million people, which is a record. 5.1 million people. The previous year we had done 4.5, so that was a big jump. And so we've been kind of averaging 4 for some time, so we crossed over to the 5 million mark. So that's a big milestone. Yeah. And also maybe another thing that could be important for people to understand is that Kenya Airways, maybe people already know this, but Kenya Airways, at least up to now, is quite a large organization by Kenyan standards. By Kenyan standards, it's a huge and very complex machine. This is a $1.3 billion business. I don't think there are many, apart from Safaricom and one or two others, I don't think there's any bigger company than Kenya Airways. So it's a huge organization with 4,600 people, flying to 56 destinations plus. We transport about 60,000 tons of cargo. Now, aviation in general, so this is not just Kenya Airways, but aviation in general is very capital intensive and also very labor intensive. So probably one of the very few industries where you have those two things, which add to the complexity of running an airline. And I know, I mean, maybe I'm preempting this question, but many people, kind of ask me, so what do you guys need to do to switch over, just to be profitable? Just do it, switch over. And it's not that easy because of the complexity of what you're dealing with here. You're dealing with a company that operates, like I said, in 56 countries, jurisdictions, tax jurisdictions, operational jurisdictions. You're operating with people who are machines which are very complex, very expensive, very highly regulated environment, very perishable product. So the complexity of the business is such that it's very volatile, right? Any small, anything that happens in the industry, in the economy, affects it significantly. So there is a terrorist attack, there is a pandemic, and we are always the first people to be hit by anything, because travel is a first thing that people stop doing, right? When they don't have money, when there's an economy issue. So I just wanted to bring those issues to the forefront. Of course, Kenya Airways does not need any introduction to, I think, most of us. So I'm not going to saying that we are the national carrier, but we are, and many other things.
The pride of Africa. Are you still the pride of Africa?
Yeah, we are the pride of Africa. We are the pride of Africa, and actually, yeah, we are the pride of Africa. Yeah, so I'll leave it there.
Vicky, can Vicky, can I add one more statistic, in the context of what Allan talked about there? Allan talks about 5.1 million passengers in Kenya. Globally, annually, there's 4.5 billion passengers per annum traveling up and down, 4.5 B. And about, I think, if I'm not wrong, there's almost 100,000 flights every day. How many flights do you do per day in Kenya? Or before
right now?
the pandemic? No, before. It's just to understand the scale of the industry.
Yeah, it's about 138.
Yeah. So it just gives you a sense of the...
Yeah. And perhaps just to put color to the point that Allan was making, Vicky, about the complexity. And the airlines have to manage a very complex ecosystem, because a lot of us, when we travel, we go to Google or Kayak or TripAdvisor to look for, how do I get from point A to B?
Yeah.
We then have to go to bookings. Yes. Then we have to go to the organizing the trip. So you get Expedia, Priceline, and all of those things, taxis, the regulators, the airports, the payment system. And the airline has to be on top of all of that to make sure that there is seamless interaction between all of these players from the beginning of the inspiration to travel to the time you land and get to your destination. And so the airline really deals with all of those value chains and worries about security and safety and all of those other things that many other industries really don't deal with.
So just listening to you and hearing you telling me about the complexity of the airline makes my first question very interesting, Vincent. So when the aviation industry came to a halt because of this pandemic, what did you start to see happen as a direct result? I'll actually ask in two ways. What happened as a direct result, and what was just aggravated? What was there before but was just made worse, so to speak, because of the COVID? I'll start with you, Vincent.
Yeah. But the first thing that happened is the whole world shut down overnight.
True.
So you have all these heavy and expensive equipment, and suddenly they're grounded. So that was the first thing, that overnight your business, your most important business, was shut down, which means the cash tap was also shut off. So immediately you start to feel stress because, as Allan was saying, as a regulated industry, the margins for airlines are very thin. A lot of people see airlines fly and they see all the crew looking smart and, but what it means is that airlines don't have deep pockets of reserves to draw from to manage this crisis. So the first thing that was hit was cash flow. And so we had to worry, what do we do with our people? What do we do with the aircraft? Because even though the aircraft is on the ground, you have to continue to maintain it to make sure that when the airwaves open up, you're ready to fly. So you're incurring costs even though the world has shut down. You're still paying your crew, your pilots, your ground staff, and you're paying your suppliers. And so you find suddenly that without deep reserves, the first thing that happens that you have to do is conservation of cash. You have to conserve cash in order to make sure that you can survive the pandemic. Many of us thought that it would last maybe a month or two, but as we know, it has lasted 4 or 5, going into 5 months. So the stress on the airlines was the cash positions. That was really what happened. And you have to make a decision about your staff. Do you send them home? Do you continue to pay them? What do you do? And that was the dilemma that virtually all airlines faced. And as you have seen, some of the big carriers in the world have either gone under or are into administration. I think yesterday or the day before, Virgin Atlantic America was put under administration.
Yeah.
SAS sent all their aircraft back to the equipment manufacturers. Yeah. So those were some of the immediate effects on airlines. At Jambojet, we were lucky that we were able to negotiate with some of our lessors to be able to renegotiate the terms of the leases. And that has allowed us to survive through this period.
And I'll push that question to Allan. Yes, Allan, please go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to add to what Vincent Vincent said there. So just to put color to what he's saying, let me give you the figures. So Kenya Airways, our monthly cash requirement is about 10 billion Kenyan shillings. So to pay for our aircraft leases, to pay our employees, to pay the finances, and so on and so forth. Okay, so if you are you're spending about 10 billion or thereabouts, and then you're shut down. So the first week you don't make any money. Fortunately, we had a window of making some revenue from cargo. And as you remember, we converted some of our 787s, our Dreamliners, into freighters. So now they are called freighters, I'm told. This is a new name for this kind of aircraft. You know, when you repurpose them, you call them freighters, you know, with a P as opposed to an F. So anyway, so we did that. So we were able to make about 10% of that. So for the last 4 months, we've been making 10%, between 10 and 15% because of the freighters and because of some evacuation flights that we've been making. So you tell me, I mean, where do you get $8 billion, 8 billion Kenya shillings times 4 for the period that we've been not operating? And then when you start operating, you scale up to about only 25%. And this story, by the way, it's replicated. It's not just a Kenya Air story. It's a Jambojet story. It's a Safarilink story. It's a story for all airlines, or most airlines, I should say. And like Vincent said, we don't have big pockets. In fact, we use a lot of the money that we collect upfront from our people who are flying. So a lot of the people who pay for tickets, you know, in the case of Kenya Airways for sure, they'll pay for tickets to travel, you know, in the future. So obviously we have the money now and we use the money now. So then we are caught in a situation where you have money which you have spent, but the people have not flown because of the pandemic. So it's a very interesting scenario to be in. And that is why, you know, for us, for example, because every airline in the world that I know of, including the ones who are not admitting it, that have survived, okay, the only caveat is the ones who have survived have gotten support from their government in one way or another, either directly or through guarantees or through some sort of support, debt support. So that is why for us it's critical. Actually, it is the only way we're going to survive, for us to get government support.
I guess that answers the question that I guess everyone was asking. How can airlines go down and the way they make so much money? I think that's what we all assume. We're like, I mean, sure, there must be some cash that you can pull off somewhere. What do you have to say about this Mbuvi?
Maybe Vicky, to address what you've just said about airlines making so much money. I think until, I believe, 2013 or 14, the airline sector had been value destroying from a return on capital employed. And it is only in the last sort of 6-7 years that actually airlines globally, if I take it from IATA statistics, have actually made money, where they're returning actually money over and above the cost of capital. So there have been some very good years over the last years. And so that's why you saw that also globally, a lot of airlines were reinvesting into new capacity. And something like this pandemic, which is a shock, takes us back. I was reading a statistic the other day that was saying that actually airlines have lost in the last 4 months all the profit they've made since 1945.
Wow.
And that just gives you a context of how this is. The last crisis in post 9/11 and even in the economic crisis of 2008, 2009, there was a dip in passenger traffic about 30%. This time round, traffic went down, down 80, 90%. It's only now coming back, and it's only back roughly at around, 50, 60%. It's still 60% down on the peak levels of 2019. If you listen to Allan, he tells you if Allan is not, if airlines are not carrying cabin factor of over 70-75%, you're not making money, and that assumes you have the right mix of revenue in the cabin. So this thing about cash, if you see IATA statistics, IATA was indicating that most airlines had cash reserves of maximum 1 to 2 months. So if you're shut down and your volumes have dropped down, you're actually in dire straits. That's why you saw in the US, for example, the US government gave $50 billion in terms of state and federal federal grants. And yet the US aviation sector was the most profitable pre-COVID. 50% of global aviation profits were made by the 4 US companies.
Okay.
And so it just puts these things in perspective. Even those carriers, you see what's happening, Air France, KLM, Lufthansa, the government bailout. If you go across into the East, the same thing. You listen to the CEO of Emirates talking about the fact that, without government support, and trying to be efficient, even airlines like Emirates have had to actually sharpen their saws, ground aircrafts, A380s, big aircrafts grounded. So it's a hot mess.
It's a hot mess. So now that you've been in it for about 4 to 5 months, what do you think maybe could have been done a bit different, or what would you say is something that the aviation industry is thinking about the next 2 to 3 years? Because I hear that's the time it's going to take for us to recover and get back to make. I don't know whether it's recover or just start again. Hearing what you're saying right now.
Yeah. I know why Mbuvi is laughing.
Why are you laughing?
Allan, do you want to go first? I have strong opinions about this.
First,
Allan, take that one first.
I'm still shocked because I always thought the aviation industry was a very rich industry, so I'm still digesting.
Let me tell you
one anecdote that I can leave you before Allan comes in is that a famous investor said, if you want to go quickly from being a billionaire to a pauper, well, own an airline. And I think Richard Branson is proving that point. Allan.
Yeah, so Vicky, let me first of all, the first point I like making is that everybody is guessing. Nobody knows what's going to happen. I think we all don't know. I've read a lot of statistics from IATA. In fact, I received one just this today, and I was wondering whether to share that to this group. I'll have a look and see if I can share 1 or 2 pages just to show you the situation and how it looks like. Now, most of the statistics are saying that it will take up to 2024 or more to get back to 2019 numbers. Oh. And in aviation, that's a big deal. We are talking about huge numbers. Aviation is not a small change. No. It's huge numbers. It's huge capital expenditure, even for small airlines. I mean, Jambojet, for example, by Kenyan standards, it's a large company. Now, of course, in aviation, it's a small company. I'm sure the same for Safarilink. So we're talking about huge numbers here. So when you say recover, we're talking about a lot of churn in terms of dollar amounts. I'll speak specifically for us as Kenya Airways, and I'm sure Mbuvi will take a view for the other airlines and again for international. So for Kenya Airways, so this year 2020, and again for most other airlines, is a lost year. In fact, we're not even looking at the profit or loss or anything like that. We're looking at the cash. We have enough cash to get by for 2020. Forget about profit, loss, whatever. That's not even in question. So if we can get by to December, the question now is, how do we look going forward? We've done our projections based on a lot of data that we have compiled on behavior, consumer behavior. Of course, we don't know yet because we want to see how consumers will behave, whether they will want to fly again or not. But based on what we know so far, and the information that we've gathered and statistics that we have, we believe that we will be at 50% in 2021, 50% of 2019 numbers.
And end of 2021?
End of 2021, we think we can be between 50 and 60%, so not much recovery. Unfortunately, like I keep saying, 2022, we Kenyans jump into an election, and you know what we do? We kill business, basically. That's what we do.
Yeah.
So we will do that in 2022 because we did it before, and I don't see any behavior change. So 2022 is another problem for us as a business and for many other businesses. And like I said, the people who get hurt first is the airline, and then maybe the hotel industry and so on and so forth, if you look at the chain, the value chain.
Yeah.
So the best case scenario for me is we will recover, or begin to recover in 2023 as a sector. And then maybe probably in 2024. Again, we are assuming that we will not have another catastrophe somewhere along the way. Okay? So we're assuming that it will be business as usual, and people's behavior will slowly change, and people will somehow get convinced that they can travel safely, right? There's also one more thing before I pass it over to Mbuvi, which is I was hoping that somehow we will get a vaccine quickly. Now, I attended another... Now, you know, the funny thing is, I attended, I was invited by some kind people, by McKinsey actually, to a talk by the WHO SG, and he spoke about this issue of the vaccine. And he didn't have very good news, which was surprising. I mean, in his mind, because I keep reading about these positive tests that are going on in the US and in Europe and in Russia and in this other place and so on and so forth. But in his mind, he said it is going to be near impossible to come up with a foolproof vaccine at all. Forget about in the near future. At
not
all.
Even 3 years. Oh my goodness.
Not even 2 to 3 years.
So
in
we
his
have
mind,
to leave it out.
He was saying we have to live with this virus. Okay, so that doesn't help from that perspective. So, Mbuvi, I don't know whether you want to bring more color.
Wow. No, I mean, Vicky, you know, Allan has said it all. The reality is that it's going to be the long haul. And airlines that will survive are those that have financial runway of whatever nature, be it cash or guarantees or certain support that allows them to actually be able to survive. And if you talk from a regional or Kenyan point of view, you know, what Allan says radiates into all other businesses. And you know, the worst thing is if it hits aviation, it hits right up to the farmer who's planting vegetables in Laikipia or somewhere in Timau, who supports the aviation sector. So what do I see in terms of what will happen? Because that's your question. I mean, what will have to happen? I think the financial structure of the industry will have to change somehow, because it's been, the reality is that somehow we have to find a nimbleness in the financing. It's a huge capital intensive industry. And the ones that will survive are those that will be supported in their financial structure. That's a reality. I would argue also, so there'll be quite a bit of restructuring from that point of view of whatever nature. The second thing that I think that we are likely to see more is cooperation. And I would argue that actually, this is a time we need to make those aggressive moves around cooperation and or consolidation, because we have probably, even though governments are going more nationalistic in terms of their perspective, but we probably have better, you probably can get quicker regulatory approval in these times because people want to try and solve the problem, in my view. And so the consolidation opportunity and the cooperation opportunity, and looking at those opportunities that you would probably never have done, have undertaken in normal times, will probably happen. I would argue that there is also probably going to be a move in the future, and this is post this, to drive more efficiency in the industry of whatever nature, both from aviation. I mean, the aircraft already, a lot of airlines were already having to renew their fleet because of all the carbon footprint issues and the risks around that. And, you know, the aviation sector was already deeply embedded in all the Paris Climate Agreement with some arrangement called CORSIA, which is a carbon offset requirements, which were going to start being implemented from now through 2025 into 2030. So we'll probably see much more efficient aircrafts coming in. So fuel reductions and all. That's why airlines like KQ invested in the 787, for example, which is 20% more fuel efficient than the 767. And so you'll see that acceleration because airlines are looking for more efficiency, and there'll have to be more efficiency in your booking systems, in all your supply chain processes. That whole process has to change because at the end of the day, the only way you'll survive is you're generating positive cash flow.
Yeah.
Long term, because you cannot be supported blindly till the end.
True.
Yeah. Just to add to that, Vicky, there are some things that have changed fundamentally in the industry, and that passenger may never come back. And so if you look at the business industry, for example, the business, a lot of business has shifted to online, like what we are doing tonight through Zoom.
Yeah.
So the business traveler, the number of business travelers may never go back to what it was before, because a lot of companies are now thinking how they can embed working from home and having web-based meetings like what we're doing now. Yeah. So, which means that the industry, the aviation industry, the travel industry as a whole, has to also transform to recognize these fundamental societal changes that are taking place. Mm-hmm. And so I think one of the things that we will have to do, and it's one of the questions that was there, you're seeing the digitization of our business happening. What, according to the World Economic Forum, the digitization of the aviation industry and the travel was supposed to happen over a 9-year period. What this pandemic has done is compress all of that to less than a year. Mm-hmm. So you find, because you have to reduce the number of touch points for the traveler. Mm-hmm. So the booking, the baggage check-in and so on. So the digital transformation of the industry is going to accelerate, partly for efficiency gains and reduce operating costs, but because that is the reality within which we are operating now. So you're going to see a lot of changes in how people travel and how they book tickets and how they check in and so on, because the industry has to give assurance to the traveler that they are safe. Because right now, a lot of people are afraid to travel because they think if they touch, the various places they'll touch. So the industry has to do a lot to reassure the traveler that they are safe coming and traveling with us. As far as this vaccine is concerned, there's another problem involved. People are afraid to be vaccinated. There's a lot of debate as to that this is another way of governments trying to control people. And so if you accelerate the period within which you receive you invent the vaccine, people are hesitant to be vaccinated. So there's a lot going on, and as Allan said, nobody really knows what the new normal will look like. And we as an industry have to be ready to respond and adjust to those changes.
Yeah. Now, sorry, just what I wanted to add one thing, because it's an important one when it comes to what changes that might need to happen. Aviation is probably the most rigid industry, maybe apart from banking, I don't know, but aviation is...
There are bankers in the house, I'm sure.
So aviation is actually it's rigid, and for good reason, because of the safety element and so on.
The regulation,
regulation. But that rigidity will need to shift. Because we as an industry will have to be responsive. In fact, one of the things that I have found, especially with the restart, is we've had to take a lead trying to help even the regulator in this case, and even government, to kind of try and reimagine how we do things, and to be in front of the issue, because customers are asking for different things now, right? Yeah. Passengers are asking for different things now. Vincent spoke very well about digitalization of the entire airline, but there are very many things. For example, what we see is that passengers will be hesitant to do hops They want to do as few hops as possible. In other words, they want to do more point to point as opposed to the transit, because that reduces risk of transmission. Okay, so how do we respond to that ask? So those are the things that we need to reimagine. Also, most travelers, or many travelers, will now be asking for special deals or special packages. How do we travel as a family or people who know each other, in the same aircraft? And we need to come up with those kinds of products that will respond to what they're asking. And by its nature, by its very nature, aviation is not built that way. You're supposed to build it and you come and fly on this aircraft. And, the way we've said, at what time, the time we put, and don't ask questions, just go. Sit on this seat and we'll take you to where you belong. Yeah. So, but now we need to change that and respond to what customers will be demanding going forward. So I think this is another thing, just really the rigidity will need to be flexed a little bit.
Okay. Vicky, listening to Vincent and Allan, you asked when is travel coming back? How would we go back? What sort of period? There are 3 or 4 things that are going to drive this. First of all, travel restrictions. Remember, we are still in that environment.
Yes, we are.
And there is no organized way in which the travel restrictions will come down. So the reality is, we will just keep on bungling into it as countries open up. And I'm sure it's a nightmare for Allan as he tries to plan where he flies today. Yeah. And this whole new thing around COVID certificates and 96 hours of PCR, etc. Imagine somebody who's leaving New York flying to Nairobi. It's 12, maybe 8-9 hours with downtime in Europe, and then another 8-9 hours into Nairobi. And maybe they're coming into Kenya, and then they want to hop into Zanzibar after this. Where will they get their PCR from in 96 hours? Just think about that from a travel restrictions point of view. The second thing, of course, is this economic uncertainty and just GDP. All countries' GDPs are down, and therefore it can tell you the economic activity will be down. And then just what Vincent was talking about, the changed patterns of travel will have a significant impact. Business travel is probably going to be reduced. But then also, who will be the new traveler? Before was probably, at least for us, it was largely the older traveler going into the parks because they could afford. Now probably that person would be more conservative. Yeah. Will we see new travel patterns emerging, younger people who are willing to spend money, who are willing to take risks, and then consumer confidence, that's a reality. What happens, what will happen? I see those as, drivers. And so when you ask, when will they come back?
You're being,
answer those 4 questions and then you get...
One of the things that we sound rather down on the industry, but it's one of the exciting things that is going to happen, Vicky, in my mind, is that there's going to be a scramble for controlling the customer.
Yeah.
Because the numbers will be reduced, and therefore the more nimble players will look for ways of making travel easier for the customer in order to own the customer. And so I think it offers opportunities for those airlines that are innovative, that are awake to the challenges that we face, to be responsive to the expectations of the customer, and therefore fashion, what Allan was saying, they need to be nimble enough and flexible enough to respond to the opportunity that this challenge offers. And so deployment of technology, so that if you need a certification for COVID and you're in New York, that information, once you get your certificate, it is used to make travel easier for you, because it is then shared within the ecosystem in such a way that it makes your transit within various points easier. So there's going to be a scramble for customers, which inevitably will lead to consolidation, which means that airlines that have access to financing will have opportunities to either acquire weaker competitors or replace competitors that will falter and fall away from the market. So there are opportunities that are going to open up in the market because of the challenges that this offers to operators in the industry. So you'll see an entire transformation within the number of players, the way they operate, and how they respond to the customer expectations.
But I think I was reading somewhere that said the smaller airlines are actually doing much better than the bigger airlines. So are you kind of saying that we're going to see smaller airlines who seem to be a bit more?
No, it's a reality. I mean, Boeing has already taken the 747 out of operation. The 380 is going out of operation because the customer, the flyer, wants to go point to point.
Yeah.
They don't want those big capacity aircraft.
No.
So for us at Jambojet, in one way, we perhaps will benefit from that because people will want to have these shorter hops. But I think it applies to the entire industry that you'll see a change in how the networks are developed so that airlines, rather than saying, well, you'll fly to Rome and then transit to London, there'll be point-to-point flights that will become more common.
Yeah, so in fact, I wanted to add, Vicky, or just if you allow me, it's one thing. You know, I have one advantage. You know, I don't have many years of experience in aviation. So it's
you have one advantage.
In a sense, that's a good thing because the challenge I'm currently having is to get a lot of the people in Kenya Airways who have been there for many years, you know, and Kenya Airways has very experienced people, to think about things differently. And by that I mean, you see, we are used to, you know, we mount a flight that goes to New York. It leaves here on schedule. It arrives in New York on schedule. People get onto the plane as we had told them to at 9:10. And then we fly them back, telling them, you know, this, you know, don't go here, you know, sit here, buckle your seatbelt, you know, and so on and so forth. And then they fly back, and then, you know, we arrive here at a certain time, and that's the way we operate. Okay. Now we have a different situation because, to give you a specific example, we have some travel agents who are saying, okay, I want you to fly at this time. I will take your front cabin, you know, the business class. In New York, but you fly at my time, and then I will fill up for you the front cabin, which is of course the most profitable one. And so, you know, just to get the Kenya Airways team who have been doing this traditionally to think that this is different now, you know, now you need to work with the customer, you know, follow their lead, you know, if that's what they want, follow their lead. It's very difficult, right? We have a situation also in China, same thing, saying we will book your first 5 flights, but you need to fly at this time. So, you know, again, follow their lead. So you have to respond to what the market is telling you. If you don't do that, you're going to be in a lot of trouble.
In fact, I think there's someone, they said something like humans have one problem. They said something about emotions, and they talked about medieval institutions and godlike technology. So we have this godlike technology that can connect us everywhere, but we still want to do things in the very same old ways that we did a long time ago. And my question actually comes from that. And I'm thinking, so now that you know that the situation is one where I think Mike Tyson says everyone knows what that game plan is until you get your first fist
punch.
Your head, your first punch to your head. Everyone knows what the game plan is. And then suddenly it's you. How are you going to, what kind of teams are you going to engage to work through that innovative space that has to happen for you to be able to respond, as you're saying, to the situation, the now very fussy customer? I can see a lot of chats coming up about experiences. Now it's no longer even just my flight was late or everything else. There's a whole lot that's going to come. What kind of space is that like? Who are you involving? Who are you looking more towards? How are you seeing that happening?
Let me start on this one because it's an interesting one for me. Like I said, you know, Kenya Airways people are very smart people. And I'm not just saying that. It's the truth. They're very smart people. I mean, they're very experienced. They know what needs to be done and how it needs to be done and so on. But they have been used to the traditional way of doing things. So what we've had to do, in fact, today, I've launched an innovation hub in Kenya Airways. And what I'm asking them to do is to sit across functions and reimagine the things that we do. everything that we do. For example, how do we sell the ticket? How can we do it differently? Not based on what they have done before or what they have read in the newspaper, but what customers want, okay? How do we revamp, for example, we have some issues in some of the areas that we're operating in. How do we change that? Okay, so we have different people and it's a revolving door, okay? So you come in, you do your ideation, it's using a hackathon method. So it's agile, so we start doing it before it comes into full fruition, and then we implement, and then we move forward and do another thing. In fact, what I was saying earlier about the product that we want to offer in New York is coming out of this process, this hackathon process. Okay, so then we don't just do it internally because that's internal focus. We incorporate other people. Okay, so for instance, involve manufacturers. In fact, Boeing is involved, for example, in that kind of ideation process. We involve some of our customers in the event of when it comes to maintenance or a new idea that's coming up. So that will have to be done that way. And what I was telling the team is what takes 2 weeks needs to take 2 days so that we can move faster, right? Especially before we become national. That's controversial.
Moving fast.
Just really moving quickly and getting things done so that that culture, is there even after become a national, So
just to complement what Allan is saying, I think when I was having this conversation with the team at Safarilink, and this whole idea of how do you stay aware and alert to what the customer needs. Today we're only flying where our customers want us to fly. I was talking to the CEO this morning. He was telling me, actually, okay, we normally do Diani, but we are opening a Malindi. We'll do a Malindi Lamu. We might do a Mombasa Lamu. You have to be, domestic is what is beginning to open up right now, and that's what you've got to do. But the thing that we were speaking about is making sure that he has a very clear real-time scenario play and customer dashboard that he can sense and respond with real indicators that he can sense and respond, because you're right, the customer will dictate the pace of the change, just like Allan is saying. I feel for Allan because he has a much bigger challenge because his customer is, right out there. Even us who run a smaller airline that is operating largely domestic has to keep on thinking what options, how we advertising, how we delivering service, how we responding to our customer needs. It's a real challenge even for smaller airlines.
Yeah. Just to add to that, I'm aware that we need to leave some time for questions, but just quickly, yesterday I had a staff forum at Jambojet, because that's how we manage. It's a very dynamic, small operation. We have, through this pandemic, we've managed through staff forums, and it's amazing how flexible and nimble our staff are. Even coming up with solutions on how to conserve cash. But what was amazing yesterday is how in tune staff are with the new digital economy. A lot of them so data management through digital, and a lot of them were offering solutions that, for me, who is not as tech savvy as they are, because the average age of the employee at Jambojet is around less than 30 years. And so they're very much in tune with what is happening in the market. And I think the airline that is going to survive in the future has to be nimble. It has to mine data to understand what is driving the market, what is driving the customer, and be responsive enough to react to that feedback they're getting from the market. So they need to have systems and processes that give them almost instantaneous feedback from the client. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to operate in the new norm.
Yeah, okay, I think so. I think I will start taking questions now, but the first one I want to ask, and ask because you mentioned about cooperation, is one that came from Michael Miner. And he says, in terms of timing, has the pandemic created a ripe situation by which the single African air transport market, SATM, should be implemented, or has it made the situation worse? And I think he forwarded this to Mr. Kilavuka, but I think Mbuvi, with your other hat, should also have something to say about this.
Yeah. Thank you, Vicky, for the question. Thank you, Michael. I would say yes from the onset. Yes, it has created the opportunity, but the difficulties of implementing SATM are not because opportunities have not been there. The difficulties are because of many, many things, including political will. Protectionism, for example, is one of them. Unfair practices by certain airlines, which we are not going to mention, and such other things that make it difficult to implement SATM. So SATM actually has been, in my opinion, is a right thing to do, but the framework within which to implement SATM is not right, because there are certain things that need to be put in place in order for us to go full throttle. Because SATM is, just for those ones who may not know, SATM is liberalizing, opening the skies in Africa so that you can fly, anybody can fly anywhere, basically. That's really what the bottom line of it is, that Ethiopian can come to Nairobi, fly from Nairobi to Entebbe, from Entebbe to Dar es Salaam, and so on and so forth, for example. And we can do the same. We can go to Johannesburg and fly to Windhoek, and so on and so forth. So that happens in Europe because the premise of SATM is based on the European model. But the European model is, of course, a lot more mature, because what they do have there, they have anti-competitive behavior rules. They have consumer protection rules that are more mature. So we need the right framework, is my point, the point I'm trying to make. But the pandemic has made it more necessary for what Mbuvi was saying earlier, either collaboration, cooperation, consolidation, all those things that will make the airline bigger and the economies of scale that make sense. To be fair, I mean, the airlines in Africa are very small. I mean, even Kenya Airways is very small. Even Ethiopian, which is much bigger than us, is actually small by international standards. If you compare it to the smaller airline in the US, it's a small airline in comparison. So that is necessary. I would argue, and I think we were having a discussion with Mbuvi earlier, I would argue, and I agree with Mbuvi's point here, I think he will say it as himself, is that we probably want to start small, start regional, because we already have the East African community. So if we can domesticate East African community, domesticate travel, air travel in East Africa, so that we can do the same for Uganda, Rwanda, Kenya, Tanzania, and so on, that will do two things. First of all, it will stress test the SATM philosophy. It will also help to reduce the cost of travel, because the cost of travel from here to Uganda, especially for Jambojet, is more than half. The tax is more than half of the airfare. So yeah, because you pay $50, and if you domesticate, it will be $6. 10% of what you were paying before.
Yeah.
So things like that will be important now if we do them now, and then we can roll it out to the rest of the. But I think, Mbuvi, you have a view on this as well.
No, fully support your view, and that was what I, even as an industry, we have advocated for a regional approach first, and that issue about domesticating air travel, it's not dissimilar to what we did with passports and sharing revenue for visitors coming into East Africa in terms of what are they called, visas. And this is a thing we've been urging governments across East Africa over the last 3-4 years, because if you want to make travel cheaper, do those things, A ticket between Nairobi and Entebbe, $105 at the last count is taxes. Where to Mombasa, it's, as he says, as Allan says, it's $6. So those, and imagine the elasticity of travel that will generate. You think about it, even new routes will establish. You'll have somebody starting, say, let's do a flight from Kisumu to Entebbe, or from Kisumu to Ngunze. You start creating new flows that were not there, and then you start creating that cooperation that creates sort of regional champions, which then could be the basis that you create much more travel. Remember, by the way, air travel in Africa, hold me true here, Allan, we still, I think air travel in Africa is only sort of 3%, 3 to 4% of global travel.
Yeah,
correct?
2 to 3%, correct.
So I mean, we are only touching the surface, and there are some of these sort of tariff and non-tariff barriers that need to be addressed as you drive towards the vision of Saturn, because that's that's a long haul. You have to start at home.
Yeah. So if I hear you correctly, you want more volumes because your business, of course, is volumes, but for that you need less taxes so that people can.
You need an enabling environment that allows you to be able to do these things, because then then you have an investment horizon through which you go through, and then you drive those things.
Okay. I'll send another question here. I think this is from Sam. He's saying he's talking about it's great to see so many female pilots in KQ featured recently on Twitter. Is there a mentorship program such as the Fly Girl being run, or by Jambojet or Safarilink? That's from.
Yeah, I think they're saying we are good, and they're saying, what about Jambojet and Safarilink?
Yeah, what about Jambojet and Safarilink?
Can I speak for Jambojet, because I'm the immediate past CEO? Because I just want to, I'll say something, and maybe Vincent, you can add to this.
Yeah. Actually,
Jambojet have done very well. Okay, forgetting even about female pilots, on top of female pilots, because that's difficult. They do have a similar mentorship program like us. In fact, they're incorporated in the whole KQ one. But the number of leaders in, Jambojet is 56% female.
Oh,
yes. And then on top of which, the leadership is more than 50% of the leadership, that is the leadership team, is female. So you can't beat that. So I just wanted to help Vincent on that one.
Yeah, no, Allan, thank you. And just, I think people tend to, when they think about women, they think that women have less rigorous roles than men. But our chief engineer at Jambojet is a woman. Our safety officer is a woman. So we don't, we would like to see even more women. As Allan says, we are already more than 50% women in the leadership. So we think that they do a wonderful job. And so when we look at them also, we don't look at them as women. We just look at them as competent officers working for us.
Yeah, correct.
So
I don't have the stats for Safarilink. I'd have to ask the CEO, but we are an equal opportunities employer, and I know there are very many women pilots and other women in the organization. The thing that is interesting, though, is we are actually the incubator for Jambojet and Kenya Airways. We train, they recruit. That's part of the natural process of transition. The smaller airlines at Wilson tend to actually be the source for a lot of the pilot traffic that goes into Jambojet and or KQ long term, which is good because it also allows for that transition to happen.
Yeah. Like the circle of life, the aviation life.
Absolutely.
I'll take a question here from Chris Otundo. I think it's interesting. Considering the lead time it takes to design newer, more efficient aircraft, sometimes even 10 years out, do you see the disruption also in the manufacturing process? Will we embrace Chinese aircraft globally? I think it's cheaper. I don't think we have customers.
But there's been Chinese aircraft actually under manufacturing for quite a while. There are actually a couple of Chinese aircraft flying in Cameroon, in Zimbabwe. So, I mean, there's even the MRJ out of Japan, which was a single aisle aircraft that was supposed to be competing with the Embraer aircraft. So, of course, globally, you have the two large traditional manufacturers, Boeing and Airbus. But, there are a lot of other people don't understand. For example, Embraer is out of Brazil, is a big manufacturer of single aisle aircraft, up to your 100-seater aircraft. Bombardier you know, with all their CRJs and recently released aircraft that can sit up to a capacity of 135 people. So, I mean, there's a lot of investment. Japan, MRJ, the Chinese. So, you know, do I think there'll be major disruption over the next years because of Chinese aircraft? Probably we'll see more of them flying, but the two, Boeing and Airbus, are miles ahead. But but the supply chains, by the way, are, you know, Boeing sources a lot from China, from Russia. I remember when we were buying the 787, there was disruption because there was a problem in Russia, and we couldn't get parts. So you will probably find that there will probably be maybe more cooperation around parts, and they'll focus much more around efficient aircraft.
Okay.
My sense.
Okay. Anyone else want to add anything?
Yes. I would have to say, you know, like Mbuvi says, the traditional manufacturers, of course, are the two big ones, the Airbus and Boeing. But what I've seen happening is, so first of all, now for the next few years, people are canceling orders for wide bodies. Okay, so there's no appetite to go thinking about manufacturing wide bodies. People, in fact, are thinking about how do you manufacture, or how do you either convert or manufacture freighters, because this is where the demand is. In fact, there's a shortage of freighters right now. We were having a discussion the other day with Boeing, and they're telling us, because we were thinking about a 777 freighter, 200, and you can get one new one, but the earliest you can get is 2023. At least that's when the slot is available. So you can see that it's full.
Yeah.
But on the other side, on the passenger side, people are canceling orders. And you also know we have a problem because of the MAX situation, remember? Don't forget that one. And so MAX was supposed to be a lot more efficient. And that was the idea, right? A lot more efficient than the new generation 737. In fact, it was supposed to be competing with the A320, right, Mbuvi? A320.
Correct.
Yeah. A320. A320 is a very efficient.
The Neo, A320 Neo.
The Neo, the A320 Neo. So now with the brakes on the 737, I think my sense is that there will be a bit of hesitation in going into new aircraft. But it's true, they will still be looking at more efficient, more environmentally friendly aircraft. And in fact, Embraer were thinking about a turboprop, which is the propeller aircraft. They were thinking of going into that and competing with Bombardier and the Airways. But then they have just shelved the idea because they say, you know, it doesn't make sense anymore because of, you know, what's happening in the industry. So I think the point I'm making is, I think people will be more interested in unmanned aircraft. I think that's where people are more going to think about manufacturing, especially for cargo and non-essential transportation. But I think that's kind of the new big thing as opposed to manned aircraft. That's my sense, at least.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to what the two have said. I think if you look at the commuter aircraft, which is the Bombardier and de Havilland, those are dominated by those two really, de Havilland and Embraer. But I think Boeing tried to buy Embraer, but
Embraer, it didn't come through.
Yeah. So you see this segmentation and consolidation already happening. China and Japan and Russia have tried to produce one-aisle aircraft that would compete with the 737, but those are not popular. They are not yet prevalent in the market. So, but it's a very expensive business producing aircraft. So I think you continue to see the domination of Boeing and Airbus for some time.
I'm wondering if aircraft manufacturers have deeper pockets than the people who use the aircraft.
Yeah, in the case of
Boeing, the value.
Boeing, yes.
Huh?
Everybody has deeper. Everybody
in the value
everybody
chain
has a deeper
makes
pocket
more
than us.
money. Everybody in the value chain makes more money than the airlines, by the way, and it's a proven fact.
Okay,
that's a reality.
So we need the airlines to be able to keep the other people still
correct.
So that's where the value
just one little anecdote that people tend not to know. that these equipment, these aircraft manufacturers have another line of business that makes a lot of money for them. For Boeing is a big producer of defense and military
defense. Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And Bombardier has left the the commercial business. It now focuses on business executive jets, and because that is more lucrative than what they do. So in that case, they are able to make more money doing other businesses than just focusing on commercial aircraft. And that's why they have bigger pockets than airlines.
So are we seeing perhaps maybe there's going to be a shift also into that kind of travel? We're to talk about
it's already happening, Vicky, and I think Allan can speak better to it than I. The emerging trends where people are now catering just for business travel, what they're calling business jets. They are not the executive jets, which is owned by high net worth individuals, but these are mainline airlines that are dedicating aircraft to business travelers and charging a premium for it. But Allan knows this business better than I do.
Okay, you know, I was reading a question here from Michael Miner, so I didn't listen to what Vicky was saying. But Vincent, what you said is true. I think what you said was true. I didn't really. I wasn't here.
It was about the transition to business demand, business jet demand.
Yes.
For travel.
Yeah. Because, you know, in fact, actually, I'll say, you know, we have specific requests. For example, in terms of businessmen wanting to fly us exclusively. You know, so that's what I was alluding to earlier.
Yeah,
so
we get
those
the
are
same.
the kind of you get the same, right?
Yeah.
So you get, those are the kind of requests we're getting now. You know, exclusive travel for specific segments of society, and so I would agree with that. There's a question here by, if you'll allow me, Vicky. I don't know whether I'm prying into.
Sure, go ahead.
I was looking at some questions here. Michael was asking a question here around returning of aircraft. And I think that's an important question to answer, because his question was about what are the modalities of returning aircraft that you don't need. Now, one of the things you have to know is that the airlines are victims. I'm telling you, we are like, you know, everyone takes advantage of the airline. Most of the contracts that are signed with the airline are to the disadvantage of airlines, including leases. So that returning an aircraft is such a difficult thing without getting penalties, because the penalties involved, and actually you could sympathize with the lessors and the manufacturers, because this is a big machine and a very expensive one. So they have committed capital to it. So they're saying, you take it, and if you want to return it, you'll return it with a huge cost and at huge penalties. So it is a very difficult discussion to have. In fact, we've been having these discussions, and I know Vincent also in Jambojet has been having similar discussions. However, this is a new world, because what we are telling the lessors and the people who own the aircraft is, okay, what is the alternative? If you leave us with this aircraft, we will not be able to pay for it anyway.
Yeah.
So let's have a sensible, you know, grown-up discussion around how do we deal with this problem that both you and I have. And so that's and we've seen some of them are reasonable, and the ones who are reasonable, then we engage them. And you know, they don't want the aircraft back, that's for sure. You know, they're saying keep it. And then we say, if we keep it at some terms, reasonable terms. So reduce lease rentals, or, you know, some
longer periods.
So, yes, exactly. Extended periods and so on and so forth. I just thought I should answer that question.
Yeah, that's a very fair point.
Allan, there was a question around with the thought of nationalization. How will that affect some of these ideas about Africa-wide market and so on, and having sort of the East African market considered as a domestic market? Will that impede or facilitate? I think there's a question. I have paraphrased it, but I think that's what it is.
There's actually that, and there's also the second one, which still speaks to nationalization and the role of government.
Yeah.
And there is a third one which asks you, who's the KQ, who's buying KQ? So
who is buying KQ? Okay, that's the easiest one of the three.
There's one to me privately here. Ask Allan who is buying KQ.
Okay, no, that's an easy, unless it's a true question, but it's the easiest, it's the easiest of the three, which is government is buying KQ. But let me just, can I spend maybe 2 minutes to explain something very quickly? You know, what we are doing is not just nationalization, okay? In fact, nationalization is part of a bigger project that we're running. Is it good for government to own any business? Of course not. That's not a good thing to do, right? To make a private company public is not a good thing to do. It's never a good thing to do, right? Because of course we know governments are very inefficient, and that everybody knows, and that everybody understands that and appreciates it. So what we are doing is not just nationalization. We are trying to do what we call aviation sector reforms, at least when it comes to Kenya Airways. And what we've done is we looked at what our competitors and other people are doing who have been successful. So, although I can see we are being recorded, but anyway, what I'm going to say here is, if you look at my competitors, if you look at, because this is a fact, if you look at ET, if you look at Emirates, Qatar, even Rwanda, those ones, what they have done is they have built around the airline a very strong ecosystem of aviation that supports the airline, okay? And that is one of the reasons why those airlines are successful. And if you look at people who have not done the same thing, and here, case in point is South Africa, who they have a national airline or an airline that is owned by government, but it's left to its own devices, then the problem also comes, because then it's not supported. There's no ecosystem around that supports the airline. So the idea was not nationalization in and by itself, was to build and consolidate the aviation assets around the airline so that they can cross-subsidize each other, okay? Now, of course, there's a risk here. The risk is that what people are questioning, which is now you have government involved, and isn't that a problem? And we've seen, again, like if you look at my competitors who are 100% owned by government, if you corporatize the national airline, in other words, let it run properly like a private entity, then there's no problem. The problem comes in when you have government interference or political interference in the airline. And I think that's what everybody's concerned with. And to be honest, even I am concerned, okay? And so we have attempted, and I'm not saying we are going to be successful, but we have attempted to build some sort of safeguards that will help, I wouldn't say stop or completely shield the airline from political interference, but we've attempted. And let's see, the jury's out there. We'll see whether that will work or not. Okay? So that's what is the issue here. Now, nationalization will support, in my opinion, will support, will accelerate domestication of or localization of airline. I think it will support the ideas around SATAM, at least locally. And I've also answered the question around political interference. Of course, the risk is there, but we've also seen other airlines who are national and they don't have much political interference in the running of the airlines. But we've also seen, on the other hand, others who do, and we've seen the effects of the difference between the two.
Okay. Anyone who wants to add anything? I think that's kind of what everyone is thinking around what nationalization might mean for KQ. Mbuvi, anything with your other hat?
No, I feel for Allan in terms of what he's going through. It's the reality is, and Allan raises a caution around it. And I think there has to be a very sober debate around the things that Allan has mentioned around creating the ecosystem, because that conversation, system-based competition, is the way to go. And you know, the ecosystem he's talking about even includes all the ground handling services and all those things, because revenue comes from all those things. And sometimes we have seen interest groups wanting to get involved in things that actually could be more beneficial if they were consolidated rather than being broken down. And I think it will also give a platform, if it's allowed to be done well, for even the Kenya government to potentially cooperate with other governments. Because, you know, if you have a platform that works right, then it probably allows. What has ET done? Ethiopia is able to go and bid for assets in another country and run them in the same way in Malawi, in Togo and places. You know, the reality is, if we do things right, then you know, somebody was asking about SATAM, how do we actually make SATAM succeed? If we are able to pull it off well here, who says then that we can't actually drive that cooperation further afield and actually be able to demonstrate that actually thing? But it will take a lot of political will and actually people standing up and saying this needs to be done in a professional way, because actually aviation does not require people jumping in and interfering on an ongoing basis, because you make decisions continuously on aviation every day. You must be very nimble. And that's something that we've got to, Allan will be elevating that conversation as this transport and aviation bill comes into force, and even the structures around the governance of it, because we were looking at that bill and some of the things that, for me, the thing that concerns me most, to Allan's point, is really around the governance structures around it. And that will be the most important thing, because that is what will allow either KQ and the associated assets to thrive or not.
Okay. So I think we're almost coming to a close of this very, very interesting discussion. I have enjoyed it. I want to ask, and I'll ask Vincent, how can the general public support the emergence of at least the local aviation industry? How can we be an enabler?
In these times?
In this time.
I think they can do so in several ways, Vicky. One is Kenyans are very patriotic. They don't often sound so, but I think they are so patriotic that they become they almost sound negative, because they critique as often as they praise. But I think if they can continue to be critics of how we operate, that gives us feedback to know areas that we need to work on and improve. So for me, sometimes it's frustrating, but it's welcome to listen to Kenyans talk about the airlines and what they are not doing well, how how we treat customers, how we should behave. So that is important. I think it's important for them to stay engaged. The second one is really patronizing the industry, because it's only by doing so that they can ensure that the airlines are sustainable. It's easy to look at Emirates or Singapore and say, well, they are better than KQ. But I think if we can remain critics, but at the same time support and insist that the airline ups its game, I think you'll see the airline succeed. And finally, I think as we talk about nationalization, we have to strive to compete with the best in the world, whether it is Singapore or Dubai. Those are really the benchmarks that as we create a platform, we must be active stakeholders and hold to account those that run these assets. Because if you go to Singapore, they tell you that we want you, the moment you land, we want you out of the airport in 15, 30 minutes. So if we keep those as things that we want to see happen to Kenya, because if we want Nairobi to be a hub, we can't stand by and critique but not be participants and support us financially. So I think the general public is very important. They are both customers, but also stakeholders in the success of the airline industry.
Okay. I'll ask one question that I think came from a young club member, Sean, and he asks about engineering apprenticeships and internships. I think perhaps you could either, Allan or Vincent, answer.
Vicky, at Jambojet, we have an active internship program and let me use the word loosely, a pupillage system. So young engineers come into the, it's like apprenticeship.
Yeah.
So we have two streams where we bring them on board while they're still in school or just soon after they graduate. And then they have a 2-year program through which they then get certified to work. So we are active because we want to build a pipeline of people that we can draw from and ensure that they meet our standards. So we already have those in place. They just need to become aware of it. And if they can get in touch with me or get in touch with the airline, with our HR person, we can provide that information for them to engage with them.
Okay, I think that's very useful. And lastly, I'll say any last words, and I'll start now with Allan, who introduced last. Any last words for this conversation?
Yeah, so, okay. Thank you, Vicky. So first of all, this has been very interesting for me. I enjoyed myself immensely. I was very tired before I started this, but I'm invigorated now. Thank you for inviting
me. The company.
Yeah, I know. So this has been very good company for me. What I just wanted to say is, oh my goodness, Mbuvi. Okay, what I wanted to say.
It's the tea.
Yeah, what I wanted to say is, I mean, I want to also just leave this on a positive note. And I wanted to assure everybody that we are working extremely hard in Kenya Airways. It's very difficult times for everybody. But we are working extremely hard. I know we have not always met expectations of our customers or our travelers, but we're working hard. We're working hard, and we're listening to you. We are trying to respond the best way we can. But there's a lot of work to do to get it right. In addition to that, we have to get over this hump because it's quite something. Make sure we are properly capitalized and then move forward. But there are huge plans ahead of us. We know that we're going to shrink, and that's a fact. We're going to shrink significantly, actually, in the next 2 years. At least the passenger business is going to shrink. But we're also looking for growth. So we will be growing, particularly our cargo business is where we're looking to grow. There's a lot of promise there. We've been trying to identify equipment, the correct equipment. We might very soon be announcing a conversion or removing of seats of some of our Dreamliners. We are in consultation with our lessors so that they can allow us to do that and also reduce their rentals, just like Mike had asked earlier. And we will be able to do very good business. And this is good for the economy as well, because there's a lot of vegetables that we need to move from here to Europe. There's a lot of fruits as well that we need to do the same. We need to move people around. We need to bring equipment from elsewhere. So we think cargo is going to grow. My own ambition is that if we can grow the cargo business to between 20 to 25% in the medium term, that would be a good thing to do. We are also looking at different ventures. We want to expand our training facility. So I'm just casting a vision of hope, as opposed to one that we've been talking about, that everything is down. So we think training is going to be important for us, and just not for aviation, but for wider training. And on top of which, we are thinking about 2 other ventures. We want to expand our clinic, and I know this is something that we've been talking about before. We want to participate in medical tourism and support that venture as well. So we have big plans. We just need to get over this hump, and then we will be good to go. Okay, and of course we have challenges. I saw somewhere, and this I'm just going to quote Steve, because Steve said it, so it's not me saying it. He said one of our biggest problems is that we have very strong unions. I would use a different word for that, but let's just use Steve's words. Very strong unions who stop us from, or who not stop us, but they delay some of our activities. Okay, so I'll leave it there. But there's hope for Kenya Airways. We will try our best to meet huge expectations from our travelers, taxpayers who fund this airline, and the general public.
Okay, thank you very much, Allan. Mbuvi, over to you.
Yeah, I would say 2 things, and I think the first one is that the aviation sector has worked very hard in cooperation with the ministry and other government agencies in securing the travel chain, and that's one thing probably that Allan did not mention, because they've spent a lot of time in making sure that your travel is safe. All the touch points, and it's a very important thing to give reassurance to people, because aviation is actually safe. Travel, and we expect that actually it's more domestic and short haul that will sort of will take root in time, and it will take time to develop this. But the reality is, that's where we need the confidence coming in. The second part is to talk more about KQ. I think one thing that we don't realize, even as Kenyans, because we criticize a lot, KQ is an ambassador and radiates. Kenya punches way above its weight because of having the sort of hub that we have here.
Correct.
And even when you look about hub, before pre-COVID, the hub density in Nairobi was actually even busier than even places like Lagos. because of the connectivity that is driven by having a national carrier here. And that serves directly even people like us, because we rely on KQ to bring in traffic that then travels on us. Yeah. So this point around how do we support KQ in achieving the dynamic around nationalization or creating this system competition is very important. And I think that is why we must speak up, and we are all doing it in various sectors. Speak up to make sure the right thing is done for KQ and the right leadership environment is created to allow KQ to flourish, because the ideas that Allan has will only succeed if, even as Kenyans, we challenge even those people in responsibility to make sure they let loose, to make sure this flower that is actually our national diplomacy actually flourish.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Mbuvi. And last now but not least,
Ngunze.
The least preferred.
No, I will not say that. He's not. Vincent, you're on mute.
Let me.
Now you're on mute. Yeah.
I want to thank everyone for dialing in. We hope you enjoyed the discussion and perhaps got something out of it. We feel honored to have been invited to this discussion this evening. So thank you, everyone. I just want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. One is that Nairobi is a natural hub for Africa. When you think about it, it's in the center of Africa. 3.5 hours to Cairo, 5 hours to Lagos, and 4 hours to Cairo. There's no other city in Africa that offers that sort of connectivity. If we are committed to this ambition that the government and KQ are trying to do, there's no reason why we cannot prosper. So I think there is great opportunity there that if it is executed right and they do everything that everybody talked about, we stand as a country to benefit from this. And KQ, as Mbuvi was saying, as the flagship carrier, would benefit from that. As Jambojet, I just want to say that this is not the first challenge that the airline industry has faced.
Yeah. The
airline industry is resilient. People have to travel regardless.
Oh, yeah.
And we want to be there to offer that facility for people to take advantage of. So I'm convinced that we'll come out of this stronger. As Jambojet, our ambition was first of all to perfect our low-cost carrier model with the support of our parent company. I didn't mention at the beginning, but we are 100% owned by Kenya Airways. But we operate autonomously because we need to be able to start to create a new brand identity in the market. And we think that the opportunity for point-to-point and low-cost carrier is great in this region. And we as Jambojet, if we succeed, our ambition is to replicate this model elsewhere. So we see this pandemic really as accelerating some of the things we are doing to perfect our business model. And as a low-cost carrier, digitization is a natural for us, and we will drive that as a means of maximizing efficiency. So we are optimistic despite the challenges, despite the challenging environment, but we think that with your support, we'll be fine.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. I think this has been a very, very useful discussion for me, for everyone. And thank you for taking the time and just making it here for the last 1.5 hours. Someone once said that, you can never take time away from anyone. Time is the one thing that you really can't price. And so I don't take it for granted. The club doesn't take it for granted that you choose to grace us with your presence today. And for that, Allan, Mbuvi, and Vincent, thank you very, very much. And let me wish you a pleasant evening and a good night. And for Allan, may you rest, for tomorrow I know you await a lot of things to discuss and do. Thank you very, very much, and have a good night, everyone. To all our listeners, thank you very, very much for taking the time to come and join the webinar sessions. And I wish you also a very good night and a very brilliant next remaining week. Take care, everyone. And
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for being such a gracious host.
Everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.